Yeah, so this class what we are going to discuss. It is on ANA or ANA and ENA blot. I think this is one query which is very common to all of us, that if ANA report comes, how to interpret it. If a patient comes with some non-specific symptom, should we order ANA or not? What is better? It is better to order ANA or ANA blot, or sometimes we say ENA blot, or sometimes we say ANA blot, and sometimes we just tell blot. So what to order, how to order, and what actually this ANA is. So that is the point which is always confusing. And for me, definitely in MD, I was not very clear. And after some point in final year, I realized it is very simple thing, but I was not clear before that how I order it or how do I interpret it. So I have made a very brief class on this, and this class, whatever we discuss, even with Dr. Jitin, and now we are going to discuss, it is getting recorded. So if anyone has missed the class or part of class, the access will be available. You just have to message me that I need access. So after 5 days, I can definitely provide this access to class. Okay. So coming to the first thing, the outline of class is what is ANA, then how do we test it, then what should we order, ANA by ELISA or ANA by immunofluorescence? That I will discuss, because we get report from outside, because most of the colleges do not have this facility of doing ANA. So we send it outside and we get for patient. Or sometimes patient gets referred to us with a report of ANA available from a private practitioner. So how to interpret it? When should we test it, and how do we interpret it? Like ANA blot, ENA blot, how it differs. That we will go. So first I will say what is ANA. Now before we go in that, just see this image, and I think we all are well aware as an intern or even as a first year that go and collect sample for patients, right? We have done it multiple time, and sometimes we were irritated with this part, that why I'm doing this even when it is not my job. But when you are doing it, you should at least know what you are collecting, how you are collecting. So whatever your EDTA tube is there, it will have like when you centrifuge, the upper layer will be having plasma, then buffy coat, which are most of the cells, and RBC are down. Why down? Because they are dense, so they are down, right? So there's a simple physics. But when you keep the sample in this red vacuity, or we say plain vacuity, so when you keep it in that, we know that it gets clotted and the serum separates. And in serum, you have done all the investigation possible in life: urea, creatinine, sodium, potassium, right? So all the investigation we keep doing in this serum sample, right? So even when I'm very sure we have sent liver function test, total protein, albumin, we keep sending for patients. But whenever we send total protein, albumin, the another portion we calculate is the globulin. Total protein minus albumin equal to globulin. And globulin, we know that they are, globulin means they are the antibodies. So IGs, it can be IgG, IgA, IgE, IgM, or IgD. So this is the globulin portion. So they are the antibodies which are located in the globulin portion. So ultimately they are present in your serum, right? So if antibody I want to detect for anyone, that is a serum sample I need for that. So now go with the name, anti-nuclear antibody. So the simple doubt goes off, that if someone asks me that you have to do ANA test for this guy, what I will collect sample, I will collect in plain serum, plain tube, and when the blood gets clotted, whatever serum is left, it has the antibody. So I think, to be very honest, in my first year MD, I was not aware of this, that ANA is sent in serum for this reason, because this is a part of it. Okay. So your serum contains your total protein. Total protein is divided in two portions, albumin and globulin. Your globulin contains antibodies, and ANA is one of the antibodies. That's why it is there. Now see, antibody, antigen is like lock and key. So if you have antibody, you must have antigen somewhere, right? So the name again we go with, so we have realized it is in serum. So antibody must be again some antigen. So again go with the name, anti-nuclear antibody, right? So it is against the nucleus of a cell, nucleus of a cell. The body as such is made up of all the cells, and that's how the complex organism like us, human being, work. So it is the antibody in serum which is against the nucleus of the cell. That is the anti-nuclear antibody. Okay, so that's how the name of ANA has been devised. And now in your practice, if someone asks you that you have to send ANA for this patient, you are very sure that okay, I have to take plain tube, let the blood clotted, and that serum what is there, it will be utilized for patient's ANA test. So it is very simple thing to collect. So many times you have collected this serum, but we have not ordered ANA if it is not available. So now let's again go with the name, that anti-nuclear antibody. So this is the image of a cell. Okay. Now cell from our biology in school we know it has cytoplasm, it has nucleus, it has nucleolus. Okay. So when we tell anti-nuclear antibody, by that literal meaning we tell that antibody should be targeting one of the structure of nucleus. Now what the nucleus has as such? The nucleus has our genetic material, that's what we call DNA, and the DNA is also along with associated with the histone, nucleosome, all other structure, and the nucleolus, right? So that's the primary thing against which this antibody should be there. But sometimes we have heard antibodies called anti-RiboP, right? In lupus, sometimes if you have heard anti-RiboP antibodies are seen, which has association with the neuropsychiatric lupus. This RiboP structure. Then let me give a very easy example. Anti-mitochondrial antibody. This is the mitochondria you can see, right? So anti-mitochondrial antibody, which is in the cytoplasm. Even RiboP is in the cytoplasm. So as such, this antibody, which are in serum, are targeting the structure of cell, a total cell, not just nucleus. So if we say the anti-nuclear antibody, the name looks wrong, right? It should be something called anti-cellular antibody. But this name of anti-nuclear antibody, we are following since 1950, and we have agreed that we will follow just anti-nuclear antibody as ANA. But in true sense, it is anti-cellular antibody. Okay. So if you tell me anti-cellular antibody, I will appreciate it. That okay, you know the basic concept. But when we are practicing, we must use anti-nuclear antibody. If you tell your lab fellow that I want to do anti-cellular antibody for this, you won't get any response from them. They do not know that because they just collect blood and do it, right? But as a physician, you must understand that anti-nuclear doesn't mean this antibody targets just nucleus, structure. Okay. So now we understood ANA is the antibody which is present in serum of a patient which targets cell, the nucleus or the cytoplasmic structure of the cell. Okay. And when it targets its own nucleus and cytoplasm, it becomes autoantibody, right? That is the autoantibody concept of autoimmunity concept, we can say. So this is very important concept first to understand. The antibody exists in the structure or in the portion of blood called serum, and it is directed against antigen which are present in the cell, cytoplasm or nucleus. But as the name was conventionally nucleus, then we follow the name of anti-nuclear antibody. Coming to the next part, that okay, we understood there is antibody and it is working against something. Now I can't remove my own cell and target like make antibody to work against that every time. Okay, but removing a patient's serum is so easy. So we get antibody in picture. So how do we test it? We know it is in serum. So patient clotted sample will do work for us. So how to get antigen to which antibody in serum will react? Okay, someone tells me that okay, sir, we are removing blood. It will have RBC, WBC, and everything. So you can target it against that. Okay, I agree with the point that we can target it against that. But the thing happens is the antibody will target that WBC or the which has nucleus and all, and it can react to that. But how do we actually detect it? It is targeting, that phenomenon is happening and we are seeing it. So for that, we need a standard method. So there are two standard methods. One is what we say immunofluorescence method, or sometimes we say the HEP2 method because HEP2 is a cell line. And second is something called ELISA method. So in immunofluorescence method, what we do, these are the, if you go to your lab or any private lab which is doing ANA, you ask them, show me the ANA slide. It will look like this. Okay. So here we use control. Let's forget about control and everything. But what we do here is on this well, we call it well. On that well, we will keep cell lines. So cell lines means there are actual cells on this well, and these are the cells it looks like. It's a nucleus and then the cytoplasm. Nucleus, then the cytoplasm. So total cell is lying on this well. Now when it is lying on this well, it is right. Now you add patient serum in this. Okay. Suppose if patient serum has this antibody will react to the cell lying on this well. Okay, so antigen antibody reaction happens. So that reaction is okay, it happened, but how to see it? So we add something called more tagged antibody, which will have fluorescence material, and then with fluorescence microscope we see it. So it's called indirect immunofluorescence, IIF antibody or ANA method. So now here you can see what you plotted on the well is total cells. Okay, total cells. Now total cell has everything. It has cytoplasm, it has nucleus, and everything is it's in native form. Means they are unchanged. They are as they are. They are here. Okay, so they can be fixed with either formalin. So the structure will be almost well preserved against which antibody can target it. Okay. Now suppose you have a patient who do not have anti-nuclear antibody, who do not have ANA positivity. Suppose we take let's say healthy control, which may not have ANA. So then when that serum you are putting on this well, antigen is there, but antibody is not there. When antigen is there, but antibody is not there, the immunofluorescence mechanism won't work and it will show as a negative. Okay. So now the brighter the light, higher the titer. That's what we tell. The brighter the light, higher the titer of antibody. But that is more of semi-quantitative method, not the quantitative. Like it won't give us exact value what is the titer of antibody. Okay, so this was the one method of getting antigen on the plate against which antibody can work. Okay, now the second method is something called ELISA. So in ELISA, what we do, this is the ELISA plate, and on this plate we put antigen. So what is the antigen here? The nucleus. So can we remove the nucleus structure from a cell? Yes, definitely we can remove the nucleus structure or any protein structure from the cell. And we know a very basic concept that majority of antibody will work against antigen and majority of antigens are proteins. Okay, so majority of antigens are protein. So through the protein isolation method, we can separate the protein and we keep that protein on the plate. Now we have kept the protein after separating. So remember this point very importantly, we are not keeping a original form of antigen. We are keeping a separated modified form of antigen on the plate. Now if patient has ANA positivity, he will have this antibody called anti-nuclear antibody which will bind to antigen. And after that with ELISA principle, there will be secondary antibody with conjugate. And after that giving a light, it will react and it will show the color. And it will exactly, depending on the color intensity, we will know what is the quantity of ANA in the patient serum. Okay, so this method looks more promising to us, right? Because it is giving us exact quantity of antibody. Okay, but what is more important is the point is here the antigen is not in its natural pure form. It is a separated modified antigen. So sometimes the antigen structure gets modified, the antibody reactivity won't happen because we know the antigen antibody is a very specific kind of reaction, lock and key phenomenon. So if antigen gets modified, this won't react. That tells that ELISA method is not as sensitive as immunofluorescence method because immunofluorescence retains the structure of the cell in its natural form. So if someone tells me that with this test you have to rule out autoimmunity or the ANA positivity, I will say at present. So what test you will prefer, immunofluorescence or ELISA? So my answer will be always immunofluorescence. Okay. If someone tells that patient ELISA of ANA is negative, so it is very unlikely he has autoantibody. I won't believe it because the sensitivity of investigation itself is low and the sensitivity of investigation called immunofluorescence is very high. Now coming to the we are always whatever concept we understand, our mind says how does it matter to me? Like in my practice, how does it matter to me? So when we are ordering a test for a patient, the cost of the test is almost paid. So we should be very judicious to our patient to offer the best available test. So from next time when you're ordering ANA, make sure you are ordering immunofluorescence ANA, not the ELISA ANA. So that is one thing you should keep in practice. Now we tell, okay, we do not order ANA at all, but okay, we all are going to do something common, which is called MCQ exam, where the question may be asked. Okay, so this is the HEP2 cell line, which is used for this ANA. And this is your MCQ question, the HEP2 cell line, and it was derived from the HeLa cell, or HeLa cell. So this HeLa cell, I will tell all of you, just note down this. and Google it, the story of the HeLa. It is one of the most beautiful story to read. And that was, I think, I will tell the ethics were broken at a level that from a patient, cell line was collected and patient did not know that. But still, in a way, we tell that HeLa is still alive among us because her cell lines are in all the labs possible. So you must read this story about HeLa when you have time. I'll say you can do after you get your DM. Okay. But still, at least those interesting facts will at least motivate us how the science has evolved. Okay. So Hep2 cell line should be your first answer. What is the standard cell line for ANA testing? If someone asks, it's a Hep2 cell line. So when your lab you are ordering, you can ask them that, okay, your immunofluorescence ANA, which cell line you are using. So if the answer comes Hep2, means he really knows that what he's doing. Okay. So this is little detailed, but ANA is one test which confuses us every day. So to remove that eternal confusion, we are discussing this point. Okay. So now we know it is antibody in serum, which is working against nucleus or the cytoplasmic structure of a cell. And the detection method is immunofluorescence, which is the best method at present or gold standard. And second method is the ELISA. Okay. Now coming to next, what should we order? So now we already know this, that immunofluorescence with Hep2 is the best thing because cells are on plate versus ELISA, which is isolated antigen on plate, which are not in their natural form sometime, or which they are there in the modified form. So the sensitivity will be lesser compared to immunofluorescence with Hep2. That's why we should order immunofluorescence when you are ordering test called ANA. Fine. So now this question is like always the confusion. When should we order? Okay. So this confusion, there are common rules. In this situation, you must not order where history and examinations are not complete. Okay, if you have not seen patient clinically, but you are confused, okay, or someone has tell that it looks like connective tissue disorder, let's order ANA. Do not do that. First, complete your differential diagnosis at least. If you do not reach to diagnosis, it's completely fine. Honestly, in rheumatology, at first visit of OPD, I never reached to de-diagnosis. Even though case might be something like simple rheumatoid arthritis, but I never miss out that it might be the polyarthritis due to hepatitis B, C, or HIV. So on day one, I do not tell diagnosis. On day one, I tell differential diagnosis. So if you do not have a differential diagnosis in picture, do not order ANA. Second, basic labs are not ready. Suppose if you don't have CBC ready and you tell me, sir, ANA is 2+ fine speckle, what to do? I will never ever address that ANA to report because we should have all the things ready in a what we say it's an easily available test which will help to interpret things very easily. Please not on the day one when patient gets admitted with emergency. ANA is never ever emergency test. It won't save any life. Okay, so it is not day one test anytime until unless your boss is screwing and you have to do it. Otherwise, don't do on day one. Okay. If you are not sure how to interpret, this is not for ANA. It is for all the tests in the world. If you don't know how to interpret, there is no point of ordering it. Or if you don't have a person who knows how to interpret, then also do not order. If you have a person, it's okay. Order it and ask him. Okay. If you do not trust your lab, that is very important point. Okay. Why I'm highlighting this point is many of the lab do not know how to report ANA and how to interpret ANA. They will write possibility of lupus cannot be ruled out. So what does that mean? Clinically also we were in the same thing. That's why we ordered ANA, right? So this is something we should be always careful on the test. Next, coming to this, if you don't know us, like I'm not exaggerating, but once you have ANA report, if you know a rheumatologist or if rheumatologist is in your hospital, please contact them that we have a patient who has come with this manifestation and this is the ANA report, how to go ahead. So that will help you a lot. Okay. But next to coming, when should we order ANA? Okay. So this is very simple rule. Only in the context of clinical sign that correlate with the antibody disease association. Okay. So when we have thorough clinical history and now we think, okay, this is looks like mixed connective tissue disorder. This looks like Sjogren syndrome. This looks like lupus. Let's order ANA. Okay. So it can help us in diagnosis, but as I told, it doesn't help you on day one or it doesn't help you to save life. Okay. So it is not like very emergency test to do anytime in life. Okay. Now the important point comes that how it should be reported. So there are three things we keep focusing on that. First is called pattern. Is it nucleus? Means we know it's a nucleus part. It's a cytoplasmic. It means if the antigens are present in cytoplasm. And third is the mitotic. Mitotic means it is present in the dividing cell target only. Okay, because sometimes like if we see this DNA and all, they are in the best configuration when the cell is dividing. So sometimes it might be targeting this part called mitotic. So what is the exact pattern? We should ask our lab. It is there. Now in nucleus, there is some thing called nucleolus, right? So it might be sometime nucleolar pattern and nuclear pattern. So both are different. We should know this. So first is the pattern we should know from where it is coming. Second most important is the titer of it. Okay. Because if I dilute too much of blood, then my taste significance will go sometime. Or if I do not dilute too much, then also it might be a problem. So it is a 1:40 dilution, then 1:80, 1:160, 1:320. For ANA by immunofluorescence, 1:80 is a standard dilution, and if MCQ is asked, this is the answer, 1:80. Okay, so as per all the guidelines in the world, 1:80 is the titer we should do ANA. So after titer, third is the intensity. It is a 1+, 2+, 3+, or 4+. Okay, that is depending on how bright it looks. Okay, it is green color fluorescence. So how bright it looks, depending on that, we give it a grading. I will say it is subjective grading. Okay, when we are seeing ANA, I think if your hospital has a lab of ANA, you must go there and just see this beautiful part called immunofluorescence ANA. So how bright it looks, depending on that we give, and how we decide it is bright or how bright it is, it always depends on your control. Like we will have control slides of positive and negative. We will compare our result with that, and we will be giving the result. It's a 1+, 2+, 3+, or 4+. So this question always comes, what to do? 1+ is there, is it significant or not? So I will again ask the same question, that do you rely your lab or not? If your answer is yes, 1+ in majority case says it's a low titer. So it may not be significant. But if some patterns are that, like suppose if I get a nucleolar pattern, and sometimes we say, okay, patient looks like it is lupus only, then I won't disrespect that 1+ also. So at the end, what matters is your patient, not the taste all the time. So always interpret your taste in context of your patient. Without that, there is no point. But if you do my ANA today and it comes 1+ homogeneous, I will tell ignore it. I don't have right now any autoimmune manifestation. Then you may ask, what about your future? In future, you have 1+, in future, you may develop. I tell, yes, it may develop, but at present, I can't do anything about that except living a healthy life. That's what I will do. Otherwise, no medication, nothing is proven to stop. And there is no guarantee that if 1+ is there, I'm going to develop lupus in my life. So I will not respect it without clinical context. It's all about clinical context that matters. So whenever you are seeing the ANA report, now focus your mind and ask three things. What is the pattern? What is the titer? And what is the intensity? Now let me be very clear. This titer is not the antibody titer as such in a patient serum or something. It's a dilution titer. So even if you want to ignore this part, it's okay. But always ask your lab that what titer did you run the test? And if you tell 1:80 or sometime 1:100, I'm completely fine. That is a standard most. But if someone asks me in MCQ, my answer is just 1:80, no other answer. The standard titer to use for AN is 1:80. Now coming to the patterns. Okay. So here we have already told that, okay, what we are going to focus is the titer 1:80. How we are going to report is 1+, 2+, 3+, or 4+. And pattern can be, first is okay, negative. If it is not, that's negative slide. Otherwise, nuclear, cytoplasmic, and mitotic. It's my request not to remember this. This all information is available online. If someone asks you what can be the patterns of AN in Viva, just first remember this basic heading of nuclear, cytoplasmic, and mitotic. And even at the end of lecture, I'm going to show you what is given in Harrison. So I will request you first remember your Harrison and then this. But this is the real fact we practice. In ANA part, I will say Harrison is not up to the level they have given because it is not that commonly focused rheumatology concept. Okay. So as such, these are the three patterns, and under that, there are so many patterns. Okay. No need to remember. There is no point of remembering. We also do not remember. We see this slide and report it. It is that simple. But what I try to remember is what is homogeneous, what is speckled, and what is centromere. These are the three patterns which are commonly asked in your exam also, even in MCQ also. So these are the three patterns you must be knowing: homogeneous, speckled, and centromere. I will show you how does that look. So now coming to the principle of reporting and interpretation, whatever I was talking till now It is through this source called anapattern.org. So if you really have time or if you have interest to see how the ANA looks and how these slides look, when someone tells mitochondrial, what does that mean even? You can go to this site. You can register even without registration. It is free site to see ANA pattern. So if you really want to see the standard ANA pattern, this is the best source to see in world. It's a anapattern.org, and these are the people who gives guidelines how to do ANA, how to interpret ANA, what are the patterns of ANA, what are the standards of ANA. So these are the people who are authority in ANA, and these are the all guidelines and documentation which keeps coming from them. So you can visit this site. It may help. But I will say if your interest is too much of rheumatology, or if you are really interested in seeing the pictures, you can actually take this visit. Now coming to the next, this is what matters for me as a MCQ, as a Viva, or even in practice. Okay, so someone tells me that pattern is nuclear homogeneous. Now see, the question comes, okay, before we go that I want to show you patterns. Okay, so this is the nuclear homogeneous pattern, because if you see, these are the nucleus which look completely homogeneous. It is not disturbed much. So this is nuclear homogeneous pattern, and this looks too bright. It is dividing cell and where that has been targeted. So it's a nuclear homogeneous pattern. Now if you see compared to this, it doesn't look that smooth. So it is not that homogeneous, but it looks very, very fine. So it's a fine speckle pattern. Now if you compare this AC4 to AC5, this image, okay, it is very rough. So it is very coarse. So it's a coarse speckle pattern. And this, if you say, it is a mitochondrial, it is centromere pattern. Sorry, it's a centromere pattern. Okay. So this is homogeneous pattern. This is fine speckle pattern. This is coarse speckle pattern, and this is centromere pattern. Now the question comes, why this pattern happens in immunofluorescence? See, we remember very basic concept. They are antibody which targets antigen in the cell. So now if antigen is located very uniformly in the cell, it will target this part very uniformly, and we will see this pattern. If the antigen is located little finely but not too uniformly, then it will detect, it will bind it in that manner. If we see here that it is very coarsely distributed, it will bind in this manner. And if it is distributed in a centromeric pattern, then it will bind in this manner. So how antigen binds to antibody binds to antigen, and how those antigens are distributed in the cell, that determines the pattern. And now we know, as a human, we try to interpret a lot of things. If it's homogeneous, so what is the most homogeneous structure in a human cell or human cell nucleus? It is a dsDNA, nucleosome, and histone. So means if pattern is homogeneous, it is likely the targeted antigen is either dsDNA or histone or nucleosome, all three. If it's a fine speckle, it can be SSA, SSB, or what we say Rho La pattern. So let's go for that, how it actually looks. And so this is the most important point. So suppose the pattern is nuclear homogeneous, what we saw, the antigens possible are dsDNA, histone, and nucleosome, and which are the disease associated SLE or drug induced lupus. So remember, drug induced lupus, all the time, all the cases, it will have only one pattern called nuclear homogeneous. It can't have any other pattern, because in drug induced lupus, the targeted antigen is histone. Histone gives nuclear homogeneous pattern. So always remember, this is the point. Now someone asks you in Viva, what is the difference between drug induced lupus and lupus? Do not tell, okay, in one drug is the factor, in one drug is not the factor, because that's the name. We know that. The most important point you have to remember, the drug induced lupus are not severe all the time. Renal and neurological manifestations are not common in drug induced lupus, and after stopping the drug, the manifestation resolves after some time. So that's the most important point to remember, the difference of drug induced lupus versus the natural lupus. Okay. The second pattern what we discussed, the fine speckle pattern, the targeted antigens are, you remember this for sure, Rho La or SSA and SSB. Rho is the second name for SSA, and La is second name for SSB. And SSA means Sjogren syndrome A, and SSB means Sjogren syndrome B. So definitely your diagnosis will have Sjogren syndrome in the picture. Other antigen can be RNA polymerase, WHO, MI2, You can remember this if you want to, but I will give you Harrison table at the end. That is the bare minimum to remember. This you want to remember for interest, you can remember. The disease associated are SLE, Sjogren's syndrome, scleroderma, and myositis. Then third pattern comes with the Coats-Pickel pattern. And in Coats-Pickel pattern, you have two antigen. U1-RNP, you can forget this SN part in between, U1-RNP and SM protein. So we know anti-Smith protein. If we all are like, at least we have crossed our MBBS to MD entrance. So we always used to remember the Smith is something or anti-Smith is something which is very specific for lupus. So lupus is something which is definitely to come. And in U1-RNP is the thing which comes in the this is called MCTD. Okay, mixed connective tissue disorder. So MCTD is something which is associated with U1-RNP. In all cases of MCTD, if you want to diagnose, you must have U1-RNP antibody as a diagnostic criteria. Okay, so sometimes we do not get separately U1-RNP antibodies in our picture. Then we rely on Coats-Pickel pattern if patient clinical history is fitting. Without clinical history, we do not interpret anything. Okay. Then comes the centromere pattern, what we saw. So it targets centromere, which is one structure, which is the protein is named CENPB. Okay, so CENPB, which is 80 kilodalton protein, which is targeted by centromere, and it is associated with the CREST syndrome, or what sometimes we tell limited systemic sclerosis. Okay. Then it can be cytoplasmic pattern also, like anti-synthetase syndrome, and even the Ribo-P antibody. Ribo-P is seen with lupus, what we discussed. Ribo-P has neuropsychiatric lupus association, and some people tell it is associated with the psychosis. And anti-synthetase syndrome, it is with myositis. So now you see this part, what I'm highlighting or making it bold, the SLE is everywhere, right? So SLE is a disease where anti-nuclear antibodies are targeting multiple antigen. While if you read MCTD, only one thing, U1-RNP. If you read Sjogren's syndrome, only one thing, it will be SSA or SSP or Rho or La. So SLE is one of the diseases where multiple antigens are being targeted. While Sjogren's syndrome or the other MCTD are diseases where only a single antigen against which antibody forms. Okay, so this table is must to know. If you want to take screenshot, take it. This is something we should know when we are getting reports. So now someone tells me report, okay, this pattern is 3, this patient has 3+ nuclear homogeneous ANA. Then my mind will definitely run, okay, it's a nuclear homogeneous. So antigen can be dsDNA, histone, or nucleosome. But yeah, if I'm lazy enough to remember antigen, I will just remember, okay, homogeneous and lupus is likely. If it's a fine speckled, I have a few differential. But see, the thing is, you do not get differential after seeing the ANA pattern. You get differential before seeing the ANA pattern on your clinical history. If patient has symptoms like Zika, parotid swelling, and distal RTA, that kind of feature, it is case of Sjogren's syndrome. Okay, so most of the time, we ultimately know before ordering a diagnosis, we must have made a clinical diagnosis. What are the possibilities? Then it is very easy to interpret. Okay, but in clinic, sometimes we go in reverse way. Patient comes to us from somewhere else and tells, this is my report, my ANA is positive, what to do? Okay, so never ever address that ANA on the first point. First, take your history examination, make it very clear what you are dealing with, and it will be very easy. So now let's go to the one step up, that how actually it should be reported. Okay, so this is like my feeling as a rheumatologist, that people report it's a strong positive, very strong positive. They report it without titers, and they write kindly correlate clinical. Okay, this happens with our radiology colleagues also, right? That we actually hope for that if they give something to us and we can make easily diagnosis, but they will just write kindly correlate clinically, and we are screwed up. What to do, we do not know. So it is always important to have a good lab, or you can talk to your lab. This is how it is reported, what anapattern.org is there. They also can go through. I think if you talk decently, they will follow it, try it, because it is helpful for us, also for patients. So this is how actually it is reported. So what I keep doing is strong positive means I take as a 2+ or 3+. See, I can't change the practice of India. Okay, how they are doing in commercial, they are going to do, they are not going to stop it. But it should not stop us from practicing our rheumatology. But if I am the rheumatologist who is reporting ANA, I will have a very standard pattern of reporting whether it's a 1+, 2+, 3+, or 4+, or whether what is the pattern of that ANA, and at what titer of dilution my lab has run that ANA test. So if I give this 3 information, any physician who reads even Google will be comfortable to interpret that ANA. So that's why it is very important to report it properly or to ask the lab which are very standard labs. So it matters in rheumatology because if you're ordering a test worth 800 or 1,000 rupees, but if the lab doesn't know how to do and if we do not know how to interpret, it's a complete waste of money. I will say better not to order only. Okay. So coming to the next thing, how we should interpret. Okay. The first rule you remember, ANA positive does not mean lupus all the time. Okay. It's very simple thing to remember. If AN is positive, do not tell it is likely to be lupus. Okay. Second, false positivity is possible. Patient matters. If you do not have clinical history, we are not going to interpret it very easily. So the false positivity must be avoided. Third, as I always focus total in my class, clinical context is the key. Okay, if I get a patient who is 23-year-old female who presented to me with bilateral lower limb edema over last 3 months, I did urine test for her and it was showing active sediment. She had hypertension. Okay, by this time I tell it's an nephritic syndrome. Okay, now when I really examine her head to toe, I found that okay, she has some oral ulcer also because I think it may happen in corona time. We do not see the oral cavity itself. It might be happening. Okay, but she had oral ulcer also. And now if I order ANA, if that comes 3 plus or even 2 plus homogeneous, I will respect it because it is likely to be lupus positivity of ANA. Now the same example of mine. Today someone comes and tells me that okay, this we are opening a new lab and we are providing free test for everyone for ANA. So I give my serum. Okay, I'm Guju fellow. Let me save my money. So I give this test. Okay, let me you do my ANA and you come back to me with report. Now tomorrow they come to me that you have 1 plus nuclear pattern of ANA. So you consult any physician or not. Okay. So now I go to physician and still the story continues. He also doesn't know what to do. So that must not happen. So you always interpret the test after taking a clinical history. I am completely asymptomatic guy who doesn't have any autoimmune clinical manifestation. So first thing, they should not have done my ANA. And if they have done even, we should not give too much importance to that part. Okay, it is not going to detect it early. ANA is not a screening test for a general population. It may be a screening test for lupus. Okay, this is a very important thing to understand. That whatever we tell it is very sensitive, it is sensitive for disease. It is not sensitive for general population. Okay, so that is the most important concept in your medicine you develop. That whenever someone tells okay D dimer, we all practice that. So I'm giving this example. D dimer, if it is not elevated, then it has very good, like if it's not elevated, it almost rules out pulmonary embolism. So that's what we tell negative predictive value is very high. But that for the case suspected of pulmonary embolism, not for normal population. So same way, ANA you must have heard in lupus, ANA is positive in 95 to 99% of the patients, but it is in lupus, not in general population. So sensitivity of ANA is very high in a patient of lupus or suspected lupus, not for general population. Okay, so this is what Harrison has given in very beautiful way that we are going to discuss in the next slide. So now this is what we all come to as a physician. What Harrison says about this ANA. I give my perspective being a rheumatologist. Okay, this is how I take my ANA and how I advise people on ANA. But what does Harrison say? So first thing they have written, ANA are found in nearly all patients with lupus. Okay, so 95 to 99% is found. It can be also found with the patient with other autoimmune diseases. Which other autoimmune diseases? Like polymyositis, scleroderma, antiphospholipid, Sjogren syndrome, drug lupus, even chronic liver or renal disorder. So if you have not taken history, everything is not lupus. And even in advanced age, okay, it doesn't have any other comorbidity or anything. Just age is more, so it can be false positive. This is your MCQ point. Positive ANA are found in, even I think this is very important Viva point also. 5% of the adult population and up to 14% of the elderly or chronically ill individuals. So if I do like a test for all of us, we are around 50 in the group. There is a chance 2 or 3 might have ANA positive. Okay, so we should not respect that much that ANA positivity can be false positive even in healthy population. In adults 5% and elderly it can be up to 15%. So always at the end, what matters is the patient, not the test. Now this is very important thing. ANA test is very sensitive but poorly specific for lupus. Okay. And one more important point, only 1 to 2% of all positive results will be caused by lupus alone. So if I give you that randomly I have done in my area ANA test, and these are the positive. Out of that, only 1 or 2% will be having lupus. So it is not something ANA positive means lupus. So the interpretation as such depends on two things: magnitude of titer. So if someone tells me strong positive or very strong positive, or in a true sense 3 plus or 4 plus, then okay, I am in. It looks like a positive test. Second, pattern observed by the immunofluorescence microscopy. Sometimes we get very weird pattern that we have not heard of it even. So please do one thing: go to your lab person that what you are actually trying to tell. Okay, rather than going on Google, first ask them what you are going to tell, because they should not be making a pattern themselves. Okay, that happens many times with us. So don't do that. If you get that kind of pattern, I need very simple answer. It is nuclear, it's a cytoplasmic, or it's a mitotic. If it's nuclear, either it's a homogeneous, fine speckle, coarse speckle, or if it is whether nucleolar or not. If I get very simple answers like this, I'm very happy. And along with that, what I need is what is the intensity of ANA what you have seen. And I will ask my lab that what was your dilution. If it tells me 1 to 20 or 1 to 40, I don't want to interpret that test. I want my test to be done at 1 to 80 dilution, or if it's okay, 1 to 100, but not any other dilution. I want my test. So first interpretation I will do at 1 to 80 only. Now, what Harrison says about diffuse and speckle pattern. The diffuse and speckle. See now, this term is new, right? Diffuse was never there. Okay. So diffuse, by diffuse they tell one of the possibility of homogeneous pattern, but what they say, diffuse and speckle patterns are list specific, where a peripheral or a rim pattern. Okay. So this is something who is not reporting ANA, but who is just reading Harrison thoroughly, who will be telling this. If peripheral or rim pattern is there, it correlates with the dsDNA, and we know dsDNA is highly suggestive of lupus. So this can be used as MCQ, this can be used as a viva, but in practice, we do not report peripheral pattern or rim pattern now. Okay, it is taken out from the nomenclature 5-6 years back, so we do not repeat it. But Harrison, even in the this edition, they have continued to write this. So if someone, your examiner, who is actually not reporting ANA but making question out of Harrison, he may ask that rim pattern is specific to, then your answer will be lupus. Or rim pattern suggests the antigen of what? It is dsDNA. Okay, so it is like dsDNA, the intensity is maximum at the periphery. That's why the rim looks brighter in the immunofluorescence. That's why this rim pattern, we report it as a specific to lupus. Okay. Now, centromeric pattern can be seen in limited scleroderma, or the other name what we told, CREST syndrome, primary biliary sclerosis, and Sjogren syndrome, or thyroiditis. Okay. Now, this is something, it is very interesting and to remember. See, thyroiditis is also an autoimmune disease. Okay. So there it is, possibility is very high to have this centromeric pattern. So now our Indian MCQ, if they see this thing, which has 4 things: limited scleroderma, primary biliary sclerosis, Sjogren syndrome, and thyroiditis. They will ask centromere patterns are seen in all of the following except. That becomes a question for them. And they will give you very similar thing: primary sclerosing cholangitis. So in exam, we may get confused. Okay, it was PBC or it was PSC. What was that exactly? That may confuse us. And thyroiditis is something which looks googly to us. Okay, thyroid is how it will be, right? But it is given in Harrison, so we respect it for MCQ. But if I really want to answer, if someone tells me that patient has centromeric pattern, my first answer will be always limited systemic sclerosis. After that, I will tell, okay, it can be seen sometime in primary biliary cirrhosis and Sjogren syndrome also. Okay. Then there are pattern called nucleolar pattern, what I have not discussed much, so I have kept in image. Now, if you see here, these all are nucleus total, in that the brightest part are nucleolar, that they are stained. So it is a nucleolar pattern, and the site what I suggested, anapattern.org, you can see all the pattern of world which exist. Okay. So this nucleolar pattern are associated with myositis and diffuse systemic sclerosis. Now, diffuse systemic sclerosis, scleroderma, we overlap when we are practicing. They are in a way different, but it's okay. We will keep right now the same. When we'll discuss Harrison part of systemic sclerosis, I will tell what is actual thing. Okay, but at present it can be same as a diffuse systemic sclerosis or inflammatory myositis, where nuclear patterns are there. So here just note down diffuse and speckled, not specific. Peripheral rim, dsDNA lupus. Centromeric has 4 dd according to Harrison. Nucleolar pattern can be seen in 2 diseases called diffuse systemic sclerosis or inflammatory myositis. So these are the points we should note down. The next thing comes is the what Harrison tells about a table. Okay. So this is something in NEET SS or Viva. It can be asked or it has been asked already as per our question library. So if you see, the diffuse pattern is targeting histone and DNA, and we have seen it is targeting histone, DNA, and even nucleosome. So according to them, diffuse is non-specific. It can be seen in drug-induced lupus or lupus itself. Okay, but if they tell peripheral rim pattern, it is specific to dsDNA, which is seen with the lupus. Okay, speckle pattern, which was the ask MCQ in exam, that all of the following diseases are associated with speckle pattern except, so answers were from this, that MCTD, lupus, Sjogren, SCLE. SCLE is a subcutaneous lupus erythematosus. Then neonatal lupus, or sometimes we tell congenital heart block, which is associated with neonatal lupus. Then 50% of Sjogren syndrome. Then again diffuse scleroderma, polymyositis, dermatomyositis, and sometimes even the pneumocystis with arthritis, which is associated with polymyositis. So these are the speckle pattern and possible things. U1RNP can be seen, SM can be seen, ROLA, SCL70, PM1 and JO1. Okay, now I will be very honest here. The JO1, what they have given here, JO1 antigen is located in cytoplasm. It can't give speckle pattern. So this is wrong here. But I won't make things that Harrison has given something wrong. But if speckle pattern answers are expected, initial answers are completely right. JO1 is located in cytoplasm. You can Google it where the JO1 is located, because all these things are associated with the anti-synthetase antibody, and the synthetase enzyme is located in your cytoplasm. So antibody should target that cytoplasmic structure, not the nuclear structure, which is going to give speckle pattern. It is not possible technically, but it is written in Harrison, so we don't discuss much technicality. We believe it if it comes to MCQ, but when it comes to practice, we can always use our common sense and think. Nucleolar pattern, RNA polymerase and other, and this is PSS, that is again primary systemic sclerosis, or we can tell is a progressive systemic sclerosis or diffuse systemic sclerosis or scleroderma, whatever name we give. Centromere, it is definitely what I written as CNPB, which is another name of kinetochore, and it is 75% of the CREST syndrome. It can be seen again with primary biliary cirrhosis, Sjogren, and thyroiditis. So this table itself is giving you a lot of MCQ for your NEET SS, but don't go too much for that. Just remember the concept. ANA is the antibody which is targeting nuclear or cytoplasmic structure of the cell. Depending on the pattern or depending on the distribution of the antigen, it will give you pattern. We will see this pattern, we will report the pattern, we will report the intensity, and then we will try to see for the possible given pattern, what are the possible antigen, and then we will go ahead if these are the things which are the possible associated disease, and that's how we interpret the test. Okay. So this is what we discuss about how pattern helps us. Now, if someone tells me that rather than testing all this pattern and all, can we do something from a cell? Let's remove dsDNA, put it on a plate, and try to see whether it's acting or not. From the cell, let's remove that Smith protein, put it on a plate, and see how it is, like whether antibody is reacting to that. From a cell, let's remove this SSA or SSB protein, put it on a plate, and see how it is working. So we can do each thing by ELISA, but you just imagine if I order each ELISA, it will be so expensive. So someone gives me idea that let's do one thing, that what test we are going to order. Sorry. Yeah. So what antigens we are going to order. All the antigen we put on a nitrocellulose paper. Okay, this nitrocellulose paper is nothing but the blot. On a blot, if you here I keep SM protein, here if I give Rho52, then SSB, SCL70, PM, SCL, JO1, and all. So around 16 or 12 antigen I can separate from the nucleus, and I plot it on this blot paper. Now this blot paper, when I'm plotting it, I have to make it linear. My protein should be linear to get plotted on this. Okay. So isolated, separate, linear protein. Why I'm stressing it? In ANA by immunofluorescence, you have a cell line which is in its natural form. In ENA blot, you are getting the antigen out of the cell or the nucleus, then you are making it in a linear configuration, and then you are plotting on nitrocellulose, and you plot it so many things together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, around 16 antigen we are putting. So now antigens are there. On this, patient serum will come. Like suppose if this cellulose paper, so if I put serum here, it will flow. And if antibody is there, it will give color. If antibody is there, it will give color. If antibody is not there, it won't give color. So it is very simple thing to do, that it can, multiple things can be tested together. But what are the number of antigen here? The number of protein I plot here. Means if I'm plotting 16, it is a 16 number. If I'm plotting 12, it's a 12 number. While you are in ANA by immunofluorescence, you have total cell available there. How many antigen does a cell have? Definitely more than 150. Okay. So what is more sensitive? Common sense. It is a cell which is more sensitive. Means the ANA by immunofluorescence is more sensitive than ENA blot or ANA blot, because here it is only limited number of antigen which we think are useful but may not be the real scenario. So if someone asks me ANA versus ELISA versus ENA blot, what is most sensitive or what is the first test to order? Is always ANA. So what rule we make is we do not order ENA blot without doing ANA. If ANA is negative, it is very unlikely ENA blot is positive. Okay, so let's discuss some scenario that ANA is positive and blot is positive. It's a win-win situation. That okay, ANA was positive, now I got 2-3 antibodies, my diagnosis of lupus is clear. Or if ANA has fine speckle pattern and my blot says it's SSA, SSB positivity, it is likely to be Sjogren's syndrome. But whatever I'm talking, I have my patient at the background. Otherwise, it never helps. If lupus patient also can have SSA, SSB positivity and fine speckle pattern, it doesn't mean patient has Sjogren's syndrome. It is still lupus because your clinical diagnosis was lupus. Okay, it's all in the interpretation what we do. It is only in the sense of your clinical context. Now we get a scenario which commonly happens. AN is positive and blot is negative. So we should not be surprised after this lecture. Okay, because we know ANA by immunofluorescence has so many antigen to target and it is quite sensitive. That's why it is positive and blot can be negative. Means there are antibodies which are targeting cells, but targeting antigen, but those antigens are not there. Sometimes people do just 4 or 6 antigen blot. Okay, so you must know what you are ordering. You are ordering a blot, what antigens are there on that. So that can help you to give a very clear idea how it is working. And the last scenario, which is even irritating for us, that ANA is negative but blot is positive. The first thing I will do, I will ask whether my lab was standard or not. They really know ANA how to do or not. Okay. So first I will ask for a technical part. And if that is also not an answer, sometime it happens specifically for antigen called SSA and SSB, that on immunofluorescence, they might not be as concentrated as they are in blot. Okay. So these are the scenario. It may happen that ANA was negative and blot was positive, but 100 times I will tell, first I will check my ANA technique. If ANA is negative, blot being positive is very, very unlikely. Okay. So if ANA comes negative, clinical context tells this is very unlikely to be autoimmune disease. Never ever waste your money on ENA blot. Okay. So now ultimately I will summarize the class by telling ANA is not day one investigation. First thing. Second, you order ENA blot only after you have done ANA. Third thing, when you are deciding to order ANA, when the two options are given of immunofluorescence versus ELISA, always immunofluorescence you should give. All the ANA do not positive, do not mean they are lupus. Okay, it's all at the end, clinical history, examination, your differential diagnosis. On top of that, we should report this ANA.